That's why I got my diagnosis basically at the beginning of this year, and it hit in my face like a brick wall.
Autistic brains differ from the norm. Not only that, but it appears as if each and every one differs in its own unique way. So autism is rich in expression, but still faces limiting generalizations. Today, I want to talk about the autism that I display, the one that blends with normality and can have catastrophic impacts on people's lives, not necessarily because of the autism itself, but because of the ignorance of it, or the failure to recognize that it is there in the first place, as I eventually would discover.
So this is actually an interesting topic.
Yeah, it's like superpowers.
Oh yeah, it's like you have superpowers in one thing and then you're just lacking in the other one. And I never could understand why I'm lacking on the other one. Now it makes sense. So no use to, judge yourself for that.
Am I correct in assuming that you think that we've advanced so much we don't need religion or God anymore?
I think we have advanced too fast in order to be able to advance the religious structure that has always been needed. Basically, we have outgrown the metaphysical part because we are way too smart when it comes to science. So we cannot believe in the fact that there was Jesus who just, rose up from the dead and actually ascended to the sky.
Hort even rejected the doctrine that Christ died on the cross as a substitute for the sins of the world.
What Hort did was to falsify information, give guesswork and hypothesis, very little evidence, very little documentation, selling this polluted text to the scholarly world. And it worked. All the men, except Burgon and a few others in England, were convinced this was the way to go. Germany took it up, France, Italy, United States of America, Canada, our school, Dallas Theological Seminary, Dr. Schaefer, that was convincing there. It went over to Princeton and went over to Southern Baptist in Louisville and A.T. Robertson. It just took the scholarly world by storm.
I understand your train of thought, but Louis Pasteur said, a little science distances a man from God, but much science brings him closer.
That's why I would put myself somewhere between agnostic and Protestant, because I think this middle ground is really important for both sides.
When you straddle the fence, you lose. You can't just straddle the fence always. You have to make a decision at one point. You have to either shit or get off the pot.
If he were telling the truth, he wouldn't have told us.
Unless, of course, he knew you wouldn't believe the truth, even if he told it to you.
Hello, can y'all hear me? Thank you. I'm so damn stupid. I always start the lives, forget to turn my mic on. I'm sitting there talking to everybody. My bad. Autism talk. Autistic individuals are more likely to be agnostic or atheist than neurotypicals. I'm autistic and Jesus is God. Let's talk. Particularly like to talk with a neurodivergent that is not a Christian, does not believe in Jesus. I want to talk with those people. Hey mate, says Arthur, same here. You want to chat with me? Is Jesus your Lord and Savior, Arthur? I mean, I will talk with you if Jesus is your Lord and Savior, but I'm looking to talk with people that don't believe that Jesus is their Lord and Savior. Oh, okay, Arthur. No, not really. No. You want to come up here? Let's have a conversation. Let's invite Arthur up. Got a nice little steak plate.
Hey mate, how's it going?
Welcome, Arthur.
How's it going, mate?
Very good. So you're autistic, huh?
So honestly, I'm number one, I'm 31, and I got my diagnosis basically at the beginning of this year, and it hit in my face like a brick wall.
DNA shows us that autism is primarily a genetic condition, something that has been passed down through generations and is still widely shared in the general population. These genes can carry something so positive, in spite of the difference they cause, that they have persisted throughout our evolution and still flourish today. Some of our important inventions, pieces of art and music, and discoveries in scientific fields that have moved our world forwards come from autistic minds. With today's exciting new technologies in neuroscience, we have seen that autistic brains differ from the norm. Not only that, but it appears as if each and every one differs in its own unique way. So autism is rich in expression, but still faces limiting generalizations. Today, I want to talk about the autism that I display, the one that blends with normality and can have catastrophic impacts on people's lives, not necessarily because of the autism itself, but because of the ignorance of it, or the failure to recognize that it is there in the first place, as I eventually would discover.
Now I'm actually kind of living with it, and I'm actually interested in talking with people who are also neurodivergent, so this is actually an interesting topic.
Yeah, it's like superpowers.
Oh yeah, it's like you have superpowers in one thing, and then you're just lacking in the other one, and I never could understand why I'm lacking on the other one. Now it makes sense. So no use to, judge yourself for that.
It's like Charles Xavier and the whole reason why he gathered the mutants.
Eric, what are you doing here? Why do you ask questions to which you already know the answers? Don't give up on them, Eric. What would you have me do, Charles? I've heard these arguments before. It was a long time ago. Mankind has evolved since then.
Yes, into us.
You're sneaking around in here, Charles. Whatever are you looking for? I'm looking for hope.
I will bring you hope, old friend. And I ask only one thing in return. Don't get in my way.
We are the future, Charles, not them. They no longer matter.
Because if you don't know how to master your power, then it'll only destroy you.
Yeah, I have gone so much against myself for so long. It takes so much to unlearn to make sure that you actually use your powers right. So I definitely agree with you.
Well, it comes with age. It's a delayed development.
I'm Mom, and I want to shoot down everything you say so I feel good about myself.
That's all it is. Your brain does not fire the same way consistently like the neurotypical brain does. And because of that, you're not as consistent. And so you want to create things around you that is consistent so that way you don't get derailed.
It is true, yeah. It is true. I noticed as well that I hate structure, but I need it at the same time. Without it, I just don't, like, I'm just so chaotic. I do everything whenever I want, whenever I feel. And the moment when somebody throws a structure in my face, I just say, hey, man, what the hell? But then I just totally work with it because it works. It just works better with me, so yeah.
Do you want to know what my 4 scheduled, consistent things are every day?
Tell me.
I wake up in the morning and I work on my videos. And then that's the first 25% of my day. The second 25% of my day, I spend driving Uber, making the money that I need to survive. The other 25% is spent on these conversations, going live, and having content to create my videos in the morning. And then the last part is winding down with some video games or a movie. I think all of those are very important for anybody. So essentially for me, 50% of my schedule is focused on building the kingdom, 25% is focused on feeding myself, and the other 25% is spent on just relieving myself. Relaxing.
That's a good approach. I have to think on how I'm structuring on that. Can I ask you, do you have the other neurodivergence that goes together with autism?
Oh, so I'll tell you a little quick history. I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was 16, but then I wasn't diagnosed. What?
That's what I wanted to understand. I didn't know if you can say ADHD because it was immediately removed when I mentioned that in the chat. So, but yeah, that's what I wanted to ask. So you were diagnosed by ADHD, and then much later you were diagnosed by autism spectrum, yeah?
Yeah, so when I was 36 in 2021, so fairly recent, like you're a little more recent than me, but in 2021 November, I had my brain scan, and the doctor said that I had ADHD, OCD, PTSD, ASD. According to my brain scans, my anxiety and depression was off the charts.
Can I ask you, has your psychiatrist suggested any meds, or have you been using any meds?
Oh, he was a little confused as to why I wanted to confirm my diagnosis so late in life for autism, because there's no medication for that. But he was trying to prescribe me all kinds of medication for my anxiety and depression, and I just tried the Prozac for 2 weeks, but then I was like, no, this is not for me. And then when I was falsely in prison in 2023 by my own mother and father, I took some Paxil for a few days and then Buspar, but then those things were no good either. And then when I went to Highland Rivers,
how is it called, the second one you just...
Buspar?
Buspar?
Yeah, Buspar or something. I think it's called Busparin or something like that. Oh, is there a lag? Are y'all getting a lag?
No, there's no lag. I'm just looking it up on the same time, because what I noticed was when it came to ADHD, I can see what you're being given, and that was basically what I was given as well. It is like, imagine you are trying to patch an issue without fighting the source, the root issue, right?
When I was medicated for ADHD, I took Adderall. And I took Adderall for about 10 years.
And how was it?
Oh, it changed my life.
Home. But it couldn't be my home, could it? Who would live like this? My first thought? Torture. But saner heads prevailed. What was this drug? I couldn't stay messy on it. I hadn't had a cigarette in 6 hours, hadn't eaten. So, abstemious and tidy? What was this? A drug for people who wanted to be more anal retentive? I wasn't high, wasn't wired, just clear. I knew what I needed to do and how to do it.
I went from having a 1.8 GPA in high school to graduating summa cum laude with a bachelor's in psychology.
There we go. And this is literally what I'm feeling. I am taking an analog of what United States has Ritalin, and I have exactly the same thing for a couple of last months. It's absolutely insane that how I have been living my life before. From one side, I've learned so many things in some different ways, but from the other side, I have been basically dysfunctional just because of this, right? Like all of the SSRIs that are basically, that you mentioned before, like Prozac, right? Those are just patches. When it comes to things like Adderall, right? Those are the things that are actually helping to function for a person, right? Instead of just fighting things like anxiety and depression. So that's something that just blew my mind away.
Yeah, well, I'm not a fan of the SSRIs. I don't
Exactly.
like antidepressants and those things because
It's like you have issues and then it causes you anxiety or depression, and then you just patch them up with SSRIs to just lower it without actually fixing the root cause, right? And that's why they are.
All it feels like is a Band-Aid, because I can feel the chemical reaction in my body, and I know that it's helping as far as the actual anxiety feeling, but it's not helping. It's still there. Everything is still there. So I was like,
just hidden, dampened, right? Just dampened, right? And that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It turns you into a drone. You just.
And I went into even a deeper hole, mate. I went to before I was actually diagnosed, I went to my psychiatrist, and they wrote out for me antipsychotics for my anxiety. And imagine what you have from being a normal person to SSRIs, and imagine exactly the same step, even lower when you take antipsychotics. I tried it for 2 days and I was like, hell no, you're just a zombie. There is no up, there is no down. You just sit there and you just exist, you know? So yeah, you have to be really, really careful. And honestly, like the awareness of like people not being scared and going for psychologists and actually diagnosing it is really, really important, because I just noticed how like I have basically lost like a decade or more than that, you know, just because I haven't been diagnosed properly. So yeah. Well, anyways, you want to go back to the topic?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
Yeah,
you're still young, 31. You got to get your life started soon, though. It's good that you figured it out at 31 at least, you know?
It's better than when you're 50, right?
Yeah, it's better late than never.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're not married yet. Yeah.
No, I'm not yet. So I wanted to go to the topic. So I know that you are, neurodivergent, so maybe you would be able to follow my absolute ramble on this one. And if I ramble too much, of course, stop me. But when I look at things like God, I don't see God as normal theists would, because I don't believe in the metaphysical and of the supernatural part. But I think that there is a historical, anthropological, and sociological reason why God is absolutely necessary, or was necessary for humans, and the moral structures that have been extracted out over thousands of years should be kept over time, because if we lose them, we can go into massive societal issues that we haven't figured out how to fix them without having an abstract deity basically that leads us.
So am I correct in assuming that you think that we've advanced so much we don't need religion or God anymore?
I think we have advanced too fast in order to be able to advance the religious structure that has always been needed. And this overreaching is causing a lot of issues in our societies. Therefore, I think that the most interesting part would be for us to understand how we can use these moral structures and integrate them in atheistic lives in order to make our society stronger. Basically, we have outgrown the metaphysical part because we are way too smart when it comes to science. So we cannot believe in the fact that there was Jesus who just, rose up from the dead and actually ascended to the sky.
During this period, Charles Darwin published his theory on evolution, which challenged the biblical account of the origins of mankind, and indeed called into question the credibility of the Bible as a record of true history. Darwin himself once professed Christianity at an early age, but at some point he turned against it. In his writings, he said,
"I can indeed hardly see how anyone ought to wish Christianity to be true. For if so, the plain language of the text seems to show that the men who do not believe, and this would include my father, brother, and almost all my best friends, will be everlastingly punished. And this is a damnable doctrine."
The Origin of Species, written by Charles Darwin, was released in 1859. And of course, it's evolution theory. It certainly is not proven. But when, I believe it was Hort, obtained the book and read it, he wrote to his friend Westcott that he did not see how Charles Darwin's Origin of Species could be refuted.
Hort specifically said he thought Darwin's theory was unanswerable. He also rejected the Genesis account of the Garden of Eden. Meanwhile, in the year 1890, Westcott would write,
"No one now, I suppose, holds that the first 3 chapters of Genesis, for example, give a literal history. I could never understand how anyone reading them with open eyes could think they did."
Upon reading their correspondence, it becomes clear what Hort meant when he spoke of the dangerous heresies he and Westcott held to, since their views were a strong departure from Orthodox Christian teaching.
They had problems in every area, whether it was ecclesiology, church doctrine, whether it was Christology, doctrine of Christ, soteriology, doctrine of salvation. They were completely apostate and heretical in all of those areas.
Hort even rejected of the doctrine that Christ died on the cross as a substitute for the sins of the world.
So we cannot believe in the fact that there was Jesus who just, rose up from the dead and actually ascended to the sky.
The popular doctrine of substitution is an immoral and material counterfeit. Nothing can be more unscriptural than the limiting of Christ's bearing our sins and sufferings to his death. But indeed, that is only one aspect of an almost universal heresy.
Yet because Hort kept his beliefs hidden from public view, the academic world was able to embrace his imaginary theory about the history of the biblical text.
And then after they finished the 1881, that wasn't enough. They had to sell it. So Hort was the mastermind who wrote an introduction to their Greek text. What Hort did was to falsify information, give guesswork and hypothesis, very little evidence, very little documentation, selling this polluted text to the scholarly world. And it worked. All the men, except Burgon and a few others in England, were convinced this was the way to go. Germany took it up. France, Italy, United States of America, Canada, our school, Dallas Theological Seminary, Dr. Schaefer, that was convincing there. It went over to Princeton and went over to Southern Baptist in Louisville and A.T. Robertson. It just took the scholarly world by storm. But it was based not on fact, but on fiction and guesswork, but cleverness.
That Greek New Testament unseated the received text as the basic text of the New Testament.
I think everyone who is a normal person would understand that, but the moral stories and the still should be extracted out because those are the ones who are basing our fundamental understanding of our societies.
I don't agree with you. I don't think we've outgrown it. I don't think that science has caused us to think that, oh, Jesus resurrecting from the dead is just hocus pocus. That's just nonsense. That could never happen. I understand when people are looking at the supernatural aspects of Jesus, they can think that way. And I'm not doubting that. I understand your train of thought. But Louis Pasteur said, a little science distances a man from God, but much science brings him closer. And the more science we discover, I would say on the contrary, it's making it even more fathomable to contemplate and comprehend the vast nature of who God actually is.
Dr. Ming Wang is an internationally acclaimed laser eye surgeon who has pioneered multiple vision correction techniques. His life story is told in the film Sight. When he came to America as a poor Chinese immigrant, he saw only opportunity and eventually earned a PhD in laser physics from MIT and an MD from Harvard.
I came from China as an atheist. I believed nothing but science. I was studying the structure of eye in med school, and I realized that the human eye is so complicated. Trillions of cells has to line up perfectly for visual signal capturing and interpretation. If any one of those cells gets out of line, the person will be born blind. So I had a big problem, and the atheist me at the time, that how could so many cells form in such a short period of time out of randomness? So I kept on asking a professor, and he said, Ming, what's a cross street? I said, there's a car. He said, what's the difference between a car and a human eye? I said, human eye is a lot more complicated. He said, okay, can you imagine how a random piece of metal form itself into a car? I said, no way. And he said, how about human eye? So right there, he opened a window in my life, making me realize that it was formed with a specific purpose for vision. So there's a designer, a creator behind that. And I start with my journey believing first there's a creator, there's a God, and later on, more specifically, the God is in the form of Jesus Christ. And Christ has died for our sin so that we could have a chance for eternity.
Why would you think that the science is actually pushing this forward? My train of thought would be that when I'm looking at the evidence of our societies today, the ones who were industrializing and the ones who were growing the fastest were the ones who were actually losing God. That is specifically when we're talking about Europe and we're talking about the places like China or United States.
This is Nietzsche. When Nietzsche said that God is dead and we killed him, that is precisely what you're talking about. Nietzsche was referring to the industrialism that was making it so that we as mankind have all the things that we need, so why should we need God?
Nietzsche knew that after the death of God, which was something he regarded as really the ultimate catastrophe, the ultimate murder, that two things were most likely to happen. One would be a descent into a kind of counterproductive nihilism, the loss of all values, that's how he construed it, and all the psychological disorientation that goes along with that. And the other would be a radical turn towards a replacement totalitarian certainty, which he believed and said would likely come from the radical left in the form of something approximating communism. He nailed that like 1850.
We don't need God. And that's exactly what it was back in the biblical times. When David is saying that these heathens say, there is no God, God doesn't see us, because they were enjoying all of the pleasures of this world. It's no different. There's nothing new under the sun, Arthur.
I'm sorry, I just didn't understand how it tracks together. But like, I understand that we are enjoying the pleasures of basically the structure of what God has built us, and I think that's why I would put myself somewhere between agnostic and Protestant, because I think this middle ground is really important for both sides.
Wait, you can never straddle the fence. Straddling the fence will get you nowhere. You won't win or lose. You're just going to lose.
I don't want to win or lose.
Well, that's what I'm trying to say. Not wanting to win or lose will only make you lose. That's the only other option. When you straddle the fence, you lose. You can't just straddle the fence always. You have to make a decision at one point. You have to either shit or get off the pot.
Why?
Because, all right, let me put it this way. When people are talking about something that's going to be put into effect, let's just say arbitrarily in 5 years, and no matter what, it's going to happen, but people don't believe it's going to happen. Some people can straddle the fence like, oh, well, I don't know if they're actually going to ban TikTok or not. We'll just write it out. Regardless, when that time comes, when that executive decision is made, if you haven't prepared for it and you just sat on the fence the whole time and then TikTok actually gets banned, guess what? You have no recourse. You have no means of coming back onto TikTok. So let me just give you an example. So with this TikTok ban, it was supposed to be banned yesterday, right? Or today. Is today the 5th? Yeah, today TikTok is supposed to be banned. Now, I had that notion, it's like, oh, I don't think so. But still, when my brother told me, hey, you should create a TikTok account under your Canada VPN, just in case, so if the US goes through and they ban TikTok, you can at least still use TikTok on that new account. But see, I made that decision. I didn't just straddle the fence and say, oh, I'm just going to wait to see. I had my backup plan. So when you straddle the fence and you don't have a backup plan, that's a problem. You'll lose.
If he were telling the truth, he wouldn't have told us.
Unless, of course, he knew you wouldn't believe the truth, even if he told us.